My husband did not argue with me before he left. That is what made it feel unreal. He slowed the car, reached over, unlocked the door, and told me to get out like it was already decided. 97 miles from home. No raised voice, no explanation, just calm finality. I remember sitting there for a second too long, trying to understand how this was happening, waiting for him to say my name, waiting for him to hesitate. He did not. I stepped out because shock makes you do things without thinking. The door closed behind me. The car pulled away. And suddenly, I was standing alone on the side of the road, with my phone in my hand and my heart racing. If this were you, what would your first thought be? Would you stand there frozen, convinced he would come back? Would your mind immediately start searching for what you did wrong? Or would you feel that quiet fear settle in, the one that tells you this was never an accident? Because that was the moment everything started to make sense. What I did not know yet was that this was not impulsive, it was not emotional, it had been planned. And the truth behind it involved people I trusted just as much as him. What happened after that was nothing I would have expected. Not the decisions I made, not how fast things changed, not what I did next. By the time my husband realized I was not coming back, I had already done something he never believed I was capable of. Stay with me. The truth comes together slowly. And tell me honestly in the comments, if this had been you, standing there alone, what would you have done first? Before that road, before the silence, and the empty stretch of highway, there was a version of my life that felt safe. I met my husband when I was not looking for anything serious. I was busy building my own routine, juggling work, friends, and the quiet belief that love would happen when it was meant to. He came into my life calmly, confidently, without pressure. That mattered to me. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered small things. He showed up when he said he would. In the beginning, I trusted him without hesitation. He knew how to make me feel chosen, not in loud ways, but in steady ones. Morning texts, checking in before big meetings, the way he would reach for my hand in public without thinking. He made commitment feel simple, not heavy. When we started talking about the future, it felt natural. Moving in together, shared routines, Sunday mornings that turned into grocery shopping and coffee runs. He talked about partnership, about being a team. I believed him because his actions matched his words. There were no obvious red flags at first. Nothing dramatic enough to warn me. Just small things that were easy to excuse. His opinions mattered more in decisions. His plans took priority when schedules conflicted. If something bothered me. But the conversation always ended with me adjusting, not him. I told myself that was compromise. Friends told me how lucky I was. He was reliable, stable, not the type to cheat or disappear. I held on to that image when doubt tried to surface. When discomfort showed up quietly, I pushed it aside. Real relationships take work, I reminded myself. We got married believing we were solid. I trusted him with my life, my finances, my future. I trusted that if things ever got hard, he would choose conversation over control, presence over silence. Looking back now, I see how trust was built slowly and intentionally, how dependence can feel like security when it is wrapped in affection, how easy it is to miss the early signs when nothing feels urgent yet. That is what makes betrayal like this so devastating. It does not begin with cruelty. It begins with comfort. And that is why, when we got into the car that day, I never imagined I would not be coming home. Not even for a second. There was a time when being with him felt effortless. Love did not arrive as intensity or obsession. It showed up as consistency. He called when he said he would. He remembered details I mentioned once and never brought up again. He noticed when I was overwhelmed and adjusted without being asked. That steadiness made me lower my guard. With him, I did not feel like I had to prove myself. We built routines that felt grounding. Weeknight dinners at home, quiet conversations that stretched late without either of us checking the time. He would sit beside me while I worked, scrolling on his phone, occasionally looking up to ask how it was going. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just presence. That mattered more than I realized then. He made space for me in his life early on, introduced me to friends, talked about plans months ahead, included me in decisions, instead of treating me like an afterthought. I felt chosen, in ways that were subtle but constant. I trusted him because nothing felt rushed. When I talked about my fears, he listened. When I talked about my goals, he encouraged them. He never made me feel like I was asking for too much. That created a sense of emotional safety that is hard to describe, unless you have felt it. The kind that lets you exhale fully. Even disagreements felt manageable. We did not raise our voices. We talked things through, or at least, that is what I believed was happening. If something ended unresolved, it did not feel dangerous. It felt temporary. Looking back, those moments were where the contrast was built. I remember thinking how different this relationship felt from the ones before. There was no chaos, no guessing, no anxiety about where I stood. That calm became my reference point, my proof that this was real. Love, when it feels safe, makes you generous. It makes you patient. It teaches you to explain away small discomfort, because nothing feels threatening yet. You believe that if something truly mattered, you would feel it clearly. That belief shaped everything. I let myself rely on him. I let my life intertwine with his. I stopped imagining exits because I did not think I would ever need one. I assumed that the foundation we were building would hold. That is the cruel part of contrast. When love feels safe, you do not prepare for abandonment. You do not question loyalty. You do not imagine being left behind. And that is why, later, when everything collapsed, it did not just break my heart. It broke my sense of reality. Because the man who left me on the road was once the man who made the world feel steady. The red flags did not arrive loudly. They blended in. At first, they looked like preferences, opinions, personality differences that couples are supposed to work through. Nothing felt serious enough to confront. Nothing felt dangerous enough to name. If I wanted to do something one way, he usually had a better suggestion. If I disagreed, he would not argue. He would pause, explain calmly why his way made more sense, and wait. Eventually, I would agree, not because I was convinced, but because it felt easier than pushing back. I told myself that was communication. Over time, I noticed how often I was the one adjusting. My schedule bent around his. My plans shifted when his changed. If something mattered to me but inconvenienced him, it quietly stopped mattering as much. He never demanded that. It just became the pattern. When I brought up concerns, he listened carefully. Then he reframed them. He would say things like, "You are overthinking this," or "You are taking it too personally." His tone was never harsh. That was what made it effective. By the end of those conversations, I felt unreasonable for feeling uncomfortable at all. I started editing myself without realizing it. I chose my words, Mom. I hesitated before bringing things up. I learned which topics caused tension and avoided them. None of that felt like control at the time. It felt like being considerate, like protecting the relationship. Friends noticed changes before I did. They would ask why I always checked with him before committing to plans, why I explained his absence for him when he canceled last minute. I defended him easily. He works a lot. He has a lot on his plate. I meant it. The shift was gradual. He started deciding things that affected both of us without asking. Small things at first. Weekend plans, financial choices, where we would spend holidays. If I hesitated, he would remind me how much he had already thought it through, how stressful it was to revisit decisions. So I stopped revisiting them. The hardest red flags to see were the ones that felt like care. He worried about my safety more than anyone I had dated before. He questioned my decisions under the guise of, he framed control as protection. If I pushed back, he looked hurt, confused, as if I had misunderstood him completely. That reaction made me doubt myself more than anything he said. I learned to trust his judgment over my own. None of this happened overnight. There was no single moment I could point to and say, that was it. That was when things changed. It was a series of small concessions that felt harmless in isolation. That is how emotional control works. It does not take something away all at once. It slowly replaces your instincts with doubt. By the time I noticed how quiet I had become, I could not remember when I stopped speaking freely. I just knew that peace had started to feel conditional. Looking back, the signs were there. They were subtle. They were reasonable. They were easy to excuse. And that is why I ignored them. Because nothing felt urgent yet. A few days away. A change of scenery. Something to reset us after months of routine. When he suggested it, I felt relieved. I wanted time together. I wanted proof that the distance I had been feeling was temporary. I did not realize then that this trip was already carrying weight I could not see. From the start, something felt off. Not wrong enough to stop, just uncomfortable enough to notice. He was quieter than usual, distracted. His phone stayed close to him, screen tilted away when messages came in. When I asked what was wrong, he said he was tired. I accepted that answer because it was familiar. We packed without excitement. No playlists, no jokes about snacks. The kind of silence that pretends to be peaceful, but feels tense if you listen closely. Once we were on the road, the discomfort settled in. He drove faster than usual, eyes fixed ahead. When I tried to make conversation, his responses were short, polite, distant. I told myself I was reading into it. Long drives can be draining. Not every moment needs to be filled. My body stayed alert. At one point, I suggested stopping for coffee. He hesitated, checked the time, and said we could do it later. Later never came. When I pointed out a rest stop, he waved it off. We will stop soon. That phrase repeated itself, without resolution. The road stretched longer. The air inside the car felt heavy. I shifted in my seat more than once, trying to shake the feeling that something was being avoided. There were moments when he glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Moments when he sighed like he was bracing himself. I remember wondering if he was about to start a difficult conversation, and then feeling relieved when he did not. That relief should have concerned me. When I finally asked if everything was okay, he said yes too quickly, then added that I worry too much. The tone was familiar, calm, certain. It ended the conversation before it could begin. I watched the miles pass, telling myself not to ruin the trip by creating tension where there was none. I reminded myself that relationships go through quiet phases, that discomfort does not always mean danger. Still, my chest felt tight. We passed long stretches of road without services. The landscape became emptier. I remember checking my phone and noticing the signal weaken. That detail stayed with me, not because it felt important at the time, but because it should have. When he finally slowed the car, I assumed we were stopping to rest. My body relaxed slightly. I leaned forward, ready to grab my bag. Instead, he unlocked the door. That was the moment everything clicked into place. Too late. The silence, the urgency without explanation, the sense that something had been decided without me. That trip did warn me. I just did not understand the language yet. He pulled over without explaining why. There was no dramatic stop, no urgency, just a slow drift toward the shoulder. Like this was a routine decision he had made many times before. The road around us was empty in every direction. Heat shimmered above the asphalt. A small sign behind us listed distances to places that suddenly felt unreachable. He put the car in park and exhaled. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I waited for him to turn toward me, to say something that would ground this moment in reality. Instead, he reached across the console and unlocked my door. "You need to get out," he said. The words landed without emotion, not angry, not apologetic, certain. My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. I asked him what he meant, but my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. He repeated himself, slower this time, as if clarity was the issue. I looked at his face, searching for hesitation. I expected discomfort, guilt, anything human. What I saw instead was resolve. I asked him how I was supposed to get home. That gesture did more damage than shouting ever could have. I told him this was not funny. He did not respond. I told him this was dangerous. He looked at the road. I told him I did not understand what was happening. He said it was not his problem anymore. The humiliation crept in quietly. I realized I was pleading without meaning to. My words softened. My tone changed. I was trying to reach the version of him that used to care. That version did not appear. When I opened the door, the heat hit me immediately. It was overwhelming, the kind that makes breathing feel heavy. I stepped out slowly, still expecting him to stop me, still believing this had gone too far to continue. The door closed behind me. The sound was final. He did not wait to see if I was okay. He did not ask if I had water. He did not check my phone. He put the car in gear and drove away. I stood there watching him disappear, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The car became smaller. The sound faded. Then there was nothing. No movement, no voices, no shelter. Just me. And the realization that my husband had abandoned me on purpose. I waited longer than I should have. I told myself he would come back, that this was some kind of test, that no one does this to someone they love. I stayed still, because moving felt like admitting it was real. Minutes passed. The silence stretched. That was when the panic arrived. My hands shook as I checked my phone. One weak bar appeared, then disappeared. I tried calling him anyway. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I looked around for help. That did not exist. Every passing car felt like a judgment. Drivers glanced briefly and kept going. A woman alone on the side of the road does not fit into an easy explanation. I stopped waving after the third car sped past without slowing. The humiliation settled deeper. I thought about how easily he had done this. How little effort it took for him to decide I was disposable. I thought about the trust I had given him freely, how much of myself I had handed over without question. That trust was gone. Something shifted in me then. Not strength, not clarity, just a cold awareness that whatever this was, it could not be undone. By leaving me there, he had crossed a line that erased any version of the future I had believed in. The road did not care. The heat did not pause. And the man I married was already gone. That moment did not just humiliate me. It severed everything. The shock wore off faster than I expected. One moment, I was standing there, waiting for him to come back. The next, my body took over. Survival does not wait for understanding. It demands attention immediately. The heat was the first sting that felt real. It wrapped around me, heavy and relentless, like the air itself was pressing in. There was no shade nearby, no trees, no buildings. Just road, dirt, and sky, stretching farther than my eyes could follow. I checked my phone again, hoping something had changed. No signal. I turned it off and back on, like that might fix it. Nothing. My battery was already low. I slipped the phone into my pocket, suddenly aware that every percentage mattered. I took stock of what I had. My purse, a half-empty bottle of water, my wallet, keys that no longer mattered. I felt foolish noticing small things like that. But focusing on details kept panic from taking over. Cars passed occasionally, not many. Each time I heard one approaching, my heart jumped. I stepped closer to the road, raised my hand slightly, then hesitated. I did not know how I looked from a distance. A woman alone, no car in sight. I lowered my arm again. The road was unforgiving. Heat rose off the pavement in waves, distorting everything beyond a few feet. My sandals were not meant for walking long distances. Within minutes, my feet stopped. I ignored it. Pain felt manageable compared to the fear creeping in around the edges. My thoughts came in fragments. How long had it been? Would he come back? Had anyone seen this happen? I kept checking behind me, half expecting his car to reappear. It did not. Each minute that passed made that hope harder to justify. The isolation sank in slowly. No voices, no movement, except the occasional vehicle that did not stop. I realized how loud silence can be when there is nothing to interrupt it. Even my breathing sounded intrusive. I forced myself to think clearly. Standing still was not helping. I needed to move. I started walking in the direction he had driven, not because I thought I would catch up, but because doing something felt better than waiting. Each step made the reality sharper. The sun burned my skin. Sweat gathered along my back. My mouth felt dry, even though I was rationing water carefully. I stopped every few minutes, looking around, hoping for a sign I was not completely alone. That was when fear shifted into something heavier. This was not just emotional anymore. This was physical. This was about how long my body could last out here without help. I thought about the distance. 97 miles had sounded abstract before. Now, it felt impossible. I felt small in a way I never had before. Stripped of context, stripped of safety, reduced to whatever decisions I made in the next few hours. The humiliation returned briefly, sharp and unwanted. I pushed it down. There would be time for that later, if there was a later. Right now, all that mattered was staying upright, staying alert, staying alive. Whatever came next would change me. I could feel that much already. And the road ahead offered no answers. I do not remember seeing the car slow down at first. I remember the sound, tires crunching against gravel behind me, different from the sharp rush of cars that had passed without stopping. This one lingered. I turned slowly, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. It was an older sedan, dusty, the kind that had clearly been on the road for a long time. The window rolled down, and a woman leaned toward me. She looked ordinary, mid-50s, tired eyes, no urgency in her movements. "Are you okay?" she asked. That question broke something open in me. I nodded automatically, even though it was a lie. Women learn early how to minimize themselves, especially when they feel vulnerable. But my voice did not cooperate. When I tried to answer, it cracked. She did not push. She did not ask why I was there. She simply opened the door and told me to sit. Her husband was driving. He did not turn around. He did not interrogate me. He just reached back and handed me a cold bottle of water, like this was the most normal thing in the world. The air inside the car felt unreal. Cool, quiet, safe. I drank slowly, because my hands were shaking. The woman kept one hand on my shoulder, steady and grounding. That small gesture felt heavier than anything my husband had done for me in years. When I finally explained what happened, neither of them reacted the way I expected. No disbelief, no questions meant to poke holes in my story. Just silence that held space instead of judgment. "That is not okay," the woman said finally. Not dramatic, not emotional, certain. Those 4 words landed deeper than sympathy ever could have. Someone had named it clearly, without excuses, without asking me to explain it away. They offered to take me as far as they could. No conditions, no pressure. I accepted because I needed to trust someone, and my instincts told me this was safe. As the road passed beneath us, I watched the landscape move again and felt something unfamiliar settle in. Relief mixed with grief. Gratitude tangled with disbelief. I had been discarded by the person who promised to protect me, being helped by strangers who owed me nothing. That contrast stayed with me. Cruelty had come from familiarity. Kindness had come from nowhere. When they dropped me off hours later, the woman hugged me like she meant it. She told me to take care of myself, to be gentle with myself. I thanked her more times than necessary, because I did not know how else to express what she had given me. As their car disappeared, I realized something important. Humanity still existed. I had just been looking in the wrong place, and that realization would shape every decision I made next. The decision did not arrive in a dramatic burst of courage. It settled quietly, the way truth often does, when there is no energy left to fight it. I sat alone later that night, replaying everything that had happened, without emotion at first. The road, the silence, the way he did not hesitate. I waited for the instinct to go home to surface, to return, confront him, demand an explanation that would make this survivable. That instinct never came. Instead, a different realization took its place. Going back would not undo what he had done. It would only force me to carry it into a space that was no longer safe. Home had changed meaning the moment he drove away. I thought about the woman I had been before that day, the compromises I had normalized, the doubts I had swallowed, the way I had learned to soften myself to keep the peace. I understood then that abandonment does not start on the side of the road. It starts much earlier, in the moments you stop trusting your own instincts. If I went back, I would be teaching him that this was survivable, that I would absorb it, that there were no real consequences for crossing that line. I could not do that to myself. Fear tried to intervene. Practical questions followed. Where would I go? How would I manage? What would people say? Those thoughts were loud, but they were not persuasive. They belonged to a version of me that believed safety came from familiarity. I realized I was no longer that person. Strength did not feel like confidence. It felt like resolve, like choosing not to explain myself, like understanding that silence, this time, could be protection instead of punishment. I turned my phone off. That single action felt heavier than anything I had done all day. It was not about disappearing to hurt him. It was about creating space where I could think without his voice shaping my reactions. I was not running. I was choosing not to beg, choosing not to negotiate my worth, choosing not to step back into a situation that had already shown me exactly who it was. That was the moment my life divided itself clearly. There was everything before that road, and everything after. And in that quiet space, between fear and clarity, I decided something that would define the rest of this story. I was not going back. Turning my phone off was not dramatic, it was deliberate. I did not block his number. I did not send a final message. I did not announce that I was leaving or explain why. I simply removed myself from reach. For the first time in a long while, my silence was not weakness. It was choice. I watched the screen go dark and felt a strange calm settle in. There is power in not responding when someone expects you to. Power in refusing to participate in the version of the story where you are required to explain your pain, so it can be dismissed. I knew that if I opened the door to conversation, he would fill it with justification, with reasons, with words meant to blur the line he had already crossed. I did not want reasons. I wanted distance. I bought a one-way ticket without overthinking it. The destination mattered less than the direction. Away, forward, somewhere he could not simply show up and rewrite what had happened. As I lay, I noticed how quiet everything felt without my phone lighting up. No apologies, no demands, no attempts to control the narrative. Just space. It felt unfamiliar, then necessary. Part of me wondered when he would notice, how long it would take before concern replaced confidence, before certainty turned into panic. I did not linger on that thought. His reaction was no longer my responsibility. I carried only what I needed: a bag, my wallet. The version of myself that had finally stopped negotiating her worth. Everything else could be replaced. Peace could not. When I sat down and the vehicle began to move, I felt the weight of finality. Not sadness, not relief, awareness. This was irreversible. Whatever happened next would unfold without him in control. Silence followed me like armor. Hours passed without interruption. I did not check messages. I did not look back. Each mile created distance, not just from him, but also from that life. That life, of all things, is the one thing peace cannot be replaced. No matter how much I try, the best thing is simply to get through it. That's why you failed. We have more to do. We are safe. We are just here to help. Whatever happens next would unfold without him. That's why our best done will start smoothly. Soon. It's not my job to protect your phone system. I'm sorry for any inconvenience this may have caused. I need your support. You will find your magical ways to help me. I hope this is said to be promptly informing. I will start smoothly, so please get in touch with me when. But from the life I had been holding together through compromise, disappearing without explanation was not about punishment. It was about preservation. I did not owe him access to me anymore. I did not owe him closure. By choosing silence, I took something back that I had slowly handed over for years: my autonomy. And somewhere along that one-way journey, I understood something clearly. This was not the end of my story. It was the first moment it truly belonged to me. I did not see the messages right away. That was the point. When I finally turned my phone back on, hours later, the screen lit up faster than it could keep allowing notifications through. Missed calls stacked on top of each other, voicemails I did not listen to, texts arriving out of order, each one more urgent than the last. The shift was immediate and unmistakable. The first messages were short, casual, almost annoyed. "Where are you? This is not funny. Call me back." There was no concern yet, just expectation, the assumption that I would reappear the moment he decided this had gone far enough. Then the tone changed. "Okay, I am serious now. You need to answer your phone. Stop doing this." That was when I understood something important. He still believed he was in control, that my silence was temporary. that I would eventually fall back into the role of explaining myself. I did not. As the hours passed without a response, the messages grew longer, more scattered, less composed. Questions repeated, words misspelled, the confidence drained out of them, line by line. Are you okay? Just text me so I know you are safe. Please. That word stood out. Please. It was the first time he had used it without leverage, without framing, without an expectation attached. It did not sound like care. It sounded like fear. By the next morning, the calls came back to back. Numbers I recognized, numbers I did not. He left voicemails this time. I could tell from the timestamps how often he checked his phone, how little time passed between attempts. The panic had set in, not because he missed me, but because the narrative had slipped out of his hands. He could not explain my absence if he could not reach me. He could not minimize what he had done if I was not there to absorb it quietly. For the first time, he was forced to sit with uncertainty. I listened to one voicemail, just one. His voice sounded tight, controlled, but strained. He said my name like it was supposed to bring me back. He said he was worried. He said we needed to talk. He never said he was sorry. That detail mattered. I turned the phone face down and let the rest go unheard. The silence I had chosen was doing its work. Not loudly, not dramatically, steadily. This was the beginning of consequence, and it was only just beginning. The truth did not come to me all at once. It surfaced slowly. In pieces I was never supposed to find. At first, I was not looking for answers. I was trying to stabilize my life. Practical things, accounts, documents, loose ends I had ignored because I trusted him to handle them. That trust lingered longer than it should have. Then I saw something that stopped me. A notification, a thread I did not recognize, familiar names, grouped together in a way that made my stomach tighten. I told myself not to open it. That curiosity would only reopen wounds I was trying to close. I opened it anyway. What I found was not confusion or regret. It was planning. Messages dated weeks before the trip. Casual at first, jokes layered with sarcasm. Then details started to appear. Locations, timing, distance. Discussions framed as hypotheticals, but precise enough to feel rehearsed. They talked about the road, about where there was no signal, about how long it would take before panic set in. I read every word slowly, hoping I was misunderstanding. That context would soften it. It did not. The conversation showed intent, not anger, not impulse, decision. There were messages about how I would react, predictions about my behavior, assumptions about how long it would take before I reached out, before I gave in, before I came back. I felt sick realizing how wrong they were. The worst part was not the logistics. It was the tone. Light, detached, almost amused. As if my fear was theoretical. As if my safety was secondary to proving a point. He participated, not reluctantly, not passively. He agreed. He added to it. He confirmed details. He treated my abandonment like a problem to solve, not a line that should never be crossed. That was the moment the betrayal became irreversible. This was not about a fight that escalated. It was not about stress or miscommunication. It was about control, about testing how much I would tolerate, about demonstrating power. I realized then why he had been so calm when he left me, why there was no hesitation in his voice. He was not making a decision. He was executing one. Every memory rearranged itself. The quiet drive, the refusal to stop, the way he avoided my eyes. It had all been part of this. I closed the thread and sat in silence, letting the reality settle into my body. The humiliation I felt earlier was replaced by clarity, a sharp, grounding understanding that this was not love. It never had been, not in the way I believed. I was not supposed to see this. I was supposed to disappear quietly, to return eventually, to absorb the lesson they thought they were teaching. Instead, I had evidence, and evidence changes everything, because now I understood the full scope of what I was walking away from. Not just a man who abandoned me, but a system that believed I would always come back. They underestimated me. That truth would become very important later. And it would be the reason the next part of this story unfolded the way it did. Revenge did not look the way people imagine it. There were no confrontations, no threats, no emotional speeches meant to make him understand what he had done. I learned quickly that clarity does not come from chaos. It comes from preparation. I started with information. I met with a lawyer quietly, without telling anyone connected to him. I did not dramatize the story. I did not exaggerate. I laid out the facts exactly as they were: the abandonment, the messages, the evidence I had seen. The lawyer did not interrupt. When I finished, she looked at me and said something that shifted everything. "This gives you leverage." That word mattered, not because I wanted to punish him, but because leverage meant I no longer had to explain myself. It meant I could move forward without asking for permission. We documented everything: dates, locations, messages. Patterns of behavior that on their own could be dismissed, but together told a clear story. Emotional control, intentional endangerment, planning. Silence became proof instead of absence. Next came finances. I separated accounts carefully, legally, quietly. I did not drain anything. I did not make impulsive moves. I followed advice, not emotion. I secured what was mine and made sure there was a clear record of every step. That was when I felt the shift, not relief, not satisfaction. Stability. For years, I had been the one adapting, adjusting, making things easier for both of us. Now, I was making things precise. Boundaries replaced compromise. Structure replaced hope. He kept trying to reach me, through numbers I did not recognize, through messages that alternated between concern and frustration. I did not respond. Every unanswered attempt strengthened my position. Every moment of silence reinforced the reality. Yet he no longer controlled the pace. I changed passwords, updated contact information, redirected important documents. Each task felt small on its own. Together, they formed something solid. This was not about hurting him. It was about making sure he could never do this to me again. The most effective revenge is often invisible. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It simply removes access. By the time he realized I was not reacting emotionally, it was too late. The process was already in motion. Decisions had been made, systems put in place. I had stopped playing defense. There was no drama for him to feed on, no explanation for him to manipulate, no emotional reaction to twist into justification. Only consequences, unfolding quietly. That is what surprised him most. He expected tears. He expected anger. He expected me to break. What he got instead was distance, documentation, and resolve. And that kind of power does not need to raise its voice to be felt. He did not accept my silence. At first, he treated it like a misunderstanding, a phase, something temporary that would correct itself once I calmed down. When that did not work, his efforts became more intentional. He reached out through people we both knew. Friends I had not spoken to in months suddenly checked in, asking questions that felt casual, but were carefully worded. "How are you doing? Are you back home yet? He is really worried. I recognized the pattern immediately. Concern framed as kindness. Information disguised as care. I did not respond. When indirect contact failed, he tried proximity. Places I used to go. Times he knew I would normally be there. I changed my routines without announcing it. Different hours, different locations. Predictability had once been comfort. Now, it was vulnerability. Messages kept coming. Some were apologetic, measured, carefully constructed to sound reso. Others were frustrated, hinting that I was being unfair, dramatic, difficult. The shift between tones was subtle, but telling. When empathy did not work, pressure followed. I did not engage with either. Boundaries are most effective when they are quiet. They do not argue. They do not justify themselves. They simply exist. And once set, they expose intent very clearly. He wanted access. He wanted a response. He wanted control back. I denied him all three, eventually. The messages started to contradict each other. Claims did not line up. Timelines shifted. Explanations changed, depending on the angle he thought might work. That inconsistency told me everything I needed to know. Someone who is honest does not need to adjust the story. I watched the attempts lose momentum. The urgency faded. The confidence eroded. Not because I confronted him, but because I refused to participate. There is a moment when manipulation collapses under its own weight, when there is no reaction to push against, no emotion to redirect, no opening to exploit. That moment is quiet, but unmistakable. I felt it when the messages stopped. Not relief, not victory, clarity. I had done something I had never done before. I had held a boundary, without explaining it, without softening it, without making myself responsible for his discomfort. That was when I knew he would never find me the way he wanted to, because I was no longer where he expected me to be. Consequences did not arrive with noise. They arrived on paper. Official letters, dates, language stripped of emotion, the kind that does not argue or negotiate, the kind that records what happened and treats it as fact. That was when the situation stopped being something he could explain away. Legal processes move slowly, but they move forward without permission. He tried to regain control through the system at first. He framed himself as confused, concerned. He emphasized misunderstandings and emotional reactions, hoping the seriousness of what he had done would blur into something mutual. That strategy did not hold up under documentation. Facts do not bend easily. The abandonment was recorded. The messages showed escalation. The planning revealed intent. Each piece alone might have been questioned. Together, they formed a pattern that was difficult to ignore. In court, his absence spoke louder than any argument he could have made. When asked to explain decisions, there were pauses instead of answers. When pressed for justification, explanations became vague. Silence, the same tool he once used against me, now worked against him. Outside of legal consequences, social ones followed quietly. People asked questions he could not answer consistently. Stories changed depending on who was listening. Sympathy eroded. Familiar support pulled back. When cruelty is documented, it loses its ability to hide behind charm. I did not correct his version of events publicly. I did not defend myself online. I did not need to. Truth has a way of resurfacing when you stop trying to control it. The most difficult consequence for him was not financial or legal. It was reputational. People who once saw him as reliable began to see distance instead. Invitations slowed. Conversations became cautious. The confidence he carried so easily before no longer landed the same way. Accountability does not always look like punishment. Sometimes It looks like isolation created by your own choices. I stayed quiet throughout all of it, not because I was afraid to speak, because I did not need to. I had already reclaimed what mattered: my safety, my autonomy, my voice, used only when it served me. By the time the process ended, there was nothing left for him to argue, no room to reframe, no narrative to rescue. The consequences were final, not because they were harsh, but because they were accurate, and accuracy leaves no escape. That was when I understood something clearly. He did not lose me because I disappeared. He lost me because of what he did, and that was a consequence he would carry long after my silence ended. Healing did not happen all at once. It arrived in small, ordinary moments that slowly added up to something solid. At first, my days felt unfamiliar, quiet in a way that was unsettling instead of peaceful. I noticed how often I expected interruption: a message questioning my decisions, a comment reshaping my thoughts. None of that came. The absence felt strange before it felt safe. Independence does not announce itself. It reveals itself gradually. I began making choices without explaining them to anyone. What time I woke up, where I went, how long I stayed. Those decisions used to feel negotiable. Now, they belonged entirely to me. Anna. That shift changed more than my schedule. It changed how I moved through the world. Fear loosened its grip slowly. I stopped scanning rooms for reactions, stopped replaying conversations in my head, stopped anticipating disapproval before it appeared. The quiet was no longer empty. It became spacious. I rebuilt routines intentionally: work that reflected my priorities, relationships that felt reciprocal instead of draining. I paid attention to how my body reacted to people and situations. Tension became information instead of something to ignore. For the first time, my instincts felt trustworthy again. There were moments when grief surfaced unexpectedly, not for him, but for the version of myself that believed endurance was the same as strength. I allowed that grief without judgment. Healing requires honesty, not denial. Support came from unexpected places, conversations that did not ask me to minimize what I had lived through. Silence that did not demand explanation. I learned that safety feels calm, not intense. Consistent, not conditional. I started planning again, not around someone else's expectations, but around my own capacity. Sleeping without vigilance, laughing without hesitation. I was no longer bracing myself for the next emotional shift. I was present. Building a life without fear did not mean erasing the past. It meant refusing to let it define my limits. I carried what I learned forward carefully, without letting it harden me. I did not need to prove anything. I did not need to rush. I was living on my own terms, and that was enough. For the first time in a long time, the future felt open instead of threatening, and I stepped into it willingly. The apology arrived years later, quietly. No warning, no dramatic lead-up, just a message that appeared on my screen one evening when I least expected it. I recognized the name immediately, and still, my first reaction was not emotion. It was distance. He wrote carefully. That much was obvious. He said he had been in therapy, that he finally understood what he had done, that he carried regret he could not undo. He said he was sorry for abandoning me, sorry for the fear, sorry for the silence that followed. I read it once, then again. The words were thoughtful, measured, almost sincere. Years ago, they would have shattered me. I would have searched them for meaning, for validation, for proof that I had not imagined the damage. Now, they landed differently. I did not feel anger. I did not feel relief. I did not feel the need to respond. The apology did not change the past. It did not restore what was lost, and it did not require anything from me to be complete. I understood then that closure is not something someone else gives you. It is something you arrive at on your own. He had grown, maybe, or maybe he had simply learned the language of accountability. Either way, it no longer mattered. What mattered was that I no longer needed him to understand. I did not reply, not out of spite, out of clarity. Indifference is not coldness. It is freedom. It is the moment when someone who once held power over your emotions becomes simply another person in your past. I wished him nothing. Not good, not bad, just distance. The apology stayed unread after that night, archived and untouched. And with that, something closed quietly inside me. Not because he spoke, but because I no longer needed to listen. What I learned from all of this did not come from revenge, courtrooms, or apologies that arrived too late. It came from the moment I stopped questioning myself. Abandonment does not always look like someone walking away in anger. Sometimes it looks calm, decided, quiet, and that is what makes it so dangerous. When cruelty comes without noise, it is easier to excuse, easier to minimize, easier to survive, instead of confront. But survival is not the same as living. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: someone who truly loves you will never place you in a position where your safety, dignity, or humanity becomes optional. Love does not test how much pain you can endure. It does not require you to disappear to be understood. Walking away does not make you weak. Staying silent does not make you wrong. Choosing yourself is not selfish. The moment I stopped trying to explain my worth to someone who benefited from misunderstanding it, my life changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. If this story resonated with you, it might be because part of you recognized yourself in it. Maybe you have ignored signs. Maybe you have normalized discomfort. Maybe you are standing at a crossroads that feels impossible to name. You are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. And you are not alone. If you were in my place, what would you have done differently? Or what would you do now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. And if this story kept you watching until the end, subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, resilience, and choosing yourself when it matters most.